Hello everyone, and welcome to the first week of Introduction to Islamic Art at Safe Cultural Heritage Group. Today I would like to talk about the following topics. What is Islamic art? Islamic art and Aniconism, and finally, the Dome of the Rock as an example of early Islamic architecture. First up, what do you think of when you hear the term Islamic art? When I first started studying, it all seemed quite complicated for me, a mix of different regions, periods, and peoples that I associated with the Muslim faith. But I quickly learned that it is not only related to religious contexts, but a more general historical term. It refers to visual arts created in cultures in which Islam was the dominant religion. As such, the objects were often produced for Muslim patrons and likely also made by Muslim artists, but that is not always the case. The term makes it seem like a homogeneous totality, which is not true. After all, we do not use the term Christian art in this manner. It is more of an umbrella term that links a wide range of arts with vastly different dates, materials, makers, audiences, and functions. It is a complex network that is also connected to pre-existing artistic traditions. We will see many different objects and depictions in varying contexts. Did you notice, for example, that this 13th century Syrian brass canteen depicts the Virgin with Child, a Christian subject? During this course, I would like to introduce a few instances of this vast area. The study of Islamic art started first with European travelers visiting different countries like Egypt or Syria due to the combined interest in art history and Orientalism. That means everything that was considered as the exotic Orient was studied more closely, or even taken back home. In the early 20th century, excavations were conducted by European scholarship. A very famous figure was Ernst Herzfeld, who excavated in Mesopotamia, among others. Another important researcher was Richard Ettinghausen, whose work we will come across later during the course. Together with Oleg Grabar, Islamic art became more popular in American scholarship as well. Especially from the 1970s onwards, the interest in Islamic art grew and different exhibitions were curated. With that came also the need to classify, for example, using regional terms like Iranian, Turkish, or Egyptian. But geographic boundaries change over time, so these terms are problematic. Another means of classification is the division into different reigning dynasties, like the Umayyads or Abbasids, the two earliest Islamic dynasties. But these often focus on masterpieces and top-down processes, meaning that artistic changes were seemingly generated from the ruling elite. Also, it is almost impossible to differentiate this field into specific artists, as it is known from European art. There are only relatively few artists, or often rather craftsmen, known by name. As such, we can see that there are a lot of challenges in the field and more research required in the future. Let us move on to the next section and to Aniconism in Islamic art. There are a few words we have to distinguish. Aniconism, which is the avoidance of images, and iconophobia, which is the fear of images. Which is it in this case? Let us look at the primary source, namely the Quran. In the Quran, images are not straightforwardly banned, but the worship of idols is prohibited on multiple occasions. For example here, idolatrous sacrifices on altars. In later 9th century Hadith, which gave rules interpreted from the Prophet's words, there are explicit prohibitions of images. This is linked with the fact that God's creation of men is a divine act that cannot be copied and therefore should not be attempted. For example, those who make these pictures will be punished on the day of judgment by being told, "Make alive what you have created," or "A house which contains images is not entered by angels." Often this is related to iconoclasm, which is different as it relates to the destruction of religious icons and monuments due to religious or also political motifs. For example, you can find it on multiple late antique mosaic pavements in Jordan. But you can see that the small mosaic stones, or tesserae, were carefully taken out so that you can often still see the shape of the animal or human figure, such as here to the right, a man leading a camel. Now, let's look at these three images, all taken by me in Isfahan, Iran. The left one is a banquet scene from an imperial palace. The middle one is from the famous Vank Cathedral, a Christian church, and the right one is from the Shah Mosque. You can see that the picture on the right is devoid of figural representations. Instead, the surfaces are filled with dense ornamentation and, very importantly, with rows of large script. These mostly represent Quranic verses, which is seen as the direct word of God. So, what can we take away from this? There are figural representations in worldly contexts, whereas aniconic imagery is preferred in sacred architectural spaces. However, when we deal with manuscripts, we will see that there are images depicting religious subjects, but more about this later. Okay, let us now look at the third section, Early Islamic Art. How did Islamic art develop? Its genesis is customarily connected with the Arab military conquests and Prophet Muhammad's death in 632 CE. But is it really? The first Arab conquerors did not really focus on making art, which happened only a few generations later. On this map you can see in the north and west Byzantine and former Byzantine territories, Arabia was to the south, Mesopotamia and Persia to the east, and in the center was Syria, with an almost metropolitan material culture. The first Islamic dynasty were the Umayyads, which were originally wealthy merchants from Mecca who acquired power after the four caliphs. Their leader eventually became the successor in 661, and his descendants ruled until 750 CE. Their core culture developed from the adoption of traditions from the conquered lands. There was a rich vocabulary of Greco-Roman sources transmitted through the Byzantine provinces, Egypt and Great Syria, as well as the imagery of the Sasanian Empire of Iran. This has been called an Umayyad eclecticism, which means that they consciously used old traditions to shape a new visual culture. Was it a natural process of adoption and adaptation, or did they want to show their dominance over the other cultures? Be that as it may, this expression is particularly reflected in their building activities, for example, the Dome of the Rock. It was a grand building project, and the patron, Abd al-Malik, set aside the tax revenues of Egypt for 7 years to build it. So let's have a look. The Dome of the Rock is located on the Haram al-Sharif in the southeastern corner of Jerusalem. Its modern name is Temple Mount and refers to Solomon's temple from around 1000 BCE. And Herod the Great built there the third Jewish temple in the 1st century BCE. But the Romans destroyed it, and Emperor Hadrian transformed the temple platform into a Roman sanctuary. Then the Dome of the Rock was built. This was a common practice. Sacred buildings were often erected where previous religious sites had been. As such, dominance was established and a certain sacredness continued. Here you can see a picture from outside. It is important to note that the building was originally decorated with mosaics on the outside as well. In the 16th century, Süleyman the Magnificent from Ottoman Turkey refitted it with tiles. But the tiles you see here are copies from the 1960s, and the golden roof is from the 1990s and would have originally been of copper. First, about the architecture. The elements of the Dome of the Rock, its piers, columns, capitals, semicircular arches, the wooden dome, its walls, the door and windows, all belong to an architectural language that was common throughout the Eastern Mediterranean world. The plan shows a circular or polygonal vaulted structure. A ring of columns in the center of the building supports the dome and creates an ambulatory around an empty middle. This belongs to a building type going back to Roman mausolea and Christian sanctuaries, commemorating a person, divinity, or an event. So it is a common architecture that was used here, possibly because of its familiarity and connection to this tradition of sacred buildings. Before we continue with the architecture, what is commemorated here? Practices and legends are associated with it, such as Muhammad's night journey and his ascension, which is actually a very popular theme in illustrated manuscripts, as you can see here. The Prophet is sitting on the steed Burak and ascending to the heavens. The Surah Al-Isra in the Quran narrates the night journey from the sacred mosque in Mecca to the farthest place of worship. Exegetical works link this destination to the Haram al-Sharif in Jerusalem, where the Dome of the Rock is located, hence the link to this narrative. Let us now have a look at the interior decoration. The thin stone walls are covered with marble plaques, forming a variety of patterns. The columns and Corinthian capitals are marble and probably taken from older Christian or pagan buildings as spolia. The arches, the spandrels, and the drum are covered with mosaics. Here you can notice at the top something familiar that we've just seen before, an inscription. It is part of the decoration, including passages and prayers from the Quran. It also dates the construction to 691 and 92, but identifies the patron as the Abbasid Caliph al-Ma'mun, who ruled in the 9th century. So basically, this ruler removed the name of the original patron, Abd al-Malik, which is a concept called damnatio memoriae, which literally means the condemnation of memory. A great variety of motifs is represented. Two categories predominate, the largest being vegetal or floral. Large acanthus leaves curl out of large vases in a symmetrical fashion. On the narrow, elongated spaces are trees, often palm trees laden with dates, or artificial compositions. This imagery is linked to the rich vocabulary of late antique Mediterranean motifs, if you compare the fleshy tendrils of the vegetal decoration. You can see a similar one in the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia in Ravenna, Italy, or in the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. It would be interesting to consider whether Greco-Roman craftsmen were employed to create these decorations. This is actually known from textual sources from another famous early Islamic building, which we will look at next week. There is also jewelry depicted, like tiaras, which has been identified by researchers as jewelry of the elite in the Christian world. The crown you can see here, with the pair of symmetrical wings, has been linked to Sasanian imagery of kingship. Still, we see that there are no figural depictions, only floral motifs and jewelry before a golden background. But there are a stunning variation of composite forms. Are these ornaments simply decoration? Or do they celebrate the victory of the new Muslim faith? Could they be trophies commemorating this victory? In a religious interpretation, it could also link to Solomon's luxurious palace. But the inscription makes no reference to Solomon. The floral decorations do not mean real plants, but likely have symbolic character. As such, they could be linked to paradise, the eternal garden frequently evoked in the Quran. Also, the pearl pendants are a reference to heavenly architecture and can also be found in Byzantine mosaics. So let us recap. The Dome of the Rock, which is considered one of the first early Islamic monuments, includes a variety of motifs, yet not figures or animals, which is connected to its religious purpose. The techniques and motifs we have looked at derive from a vocabulary of late antique Mediterranean and Sasanian art, and are not innovations of an Islamic culture. They are adaptations for a new use, and new meanings are ascribed to traditional forms. So, in the Umayyad search for identity, recourses to late antique traditions and contemporary motifs make up the Dome of the Rock's decoration. Images are vehicles of identity. The caliphs emulated symbols of legitimacy of other empires through their imagery. As such, they constructed their own symbolic visual language. Thank you very much for listening. Check out the online classroom for assignments and notifications. And, above all, stay tuned for next week's lecture on mosques and ornament. Bye-bye.